Picture the most important moment of your last year, the one you swear you could replay like video. Now zoom in, the exact words, the exact time, the exact color of a sleeve. Feel that certainty flicker? That shimmer isn't nostalgia. It's your brain improvising the past in real time. So here's the question that should unsettle you, in the best way. If memory is the foundation of identity, what happens when memory isn't a recording, but a reconstruction? It's January. The calendar has turned, and with it comes that deeply human ritual, reviewing the year like it's a film you own. You're alone for a second, maybe with a phone screen glowing, maybe with a mug cooling in your hands, and your mind does what minds do when they smell a new beginning. It rewinds. You land on a pivotal scene. Not the whole year, just one moment with a gravitational pull, an argument that changed a relationship, a first meeting that felt like a doorway, a decision that split your life into before and after. The memory arrives like footage. You can almost hear the room tone. You can almost taste the air. Now stay there with me. Don't let the moment rush by in a blur of feelings. We're going to do something slightly unnatural. We're going to audit it. Zoom in on a detail you've never questioned. The exact words. The placement of hands. The pattern on a shirt. The time on the clock. At first, it feels crisp, like you're finally seeing the pixels. But the closer you look, the more the memory starts to shimmer. It doesn't sharpen into certainty. It wavers. It behaves less like a photograph and more like weather. And that's the first hint that something profound is going on. Your past, this thing you treat as fixed, might be more like a forecast that updates when new data comes in. If that's true, then a second, much more intimate truth follows. Your identity, your sense of being you, is built on a living model, not an archival recording. So tonight, I want to take one single moment, one tiny slice of experience, and follow it as it travels through the brain. We'll watch it get written, stored, recalled, and then, quietly edited. By the end, you won't just understand why false memories can feel more real than reality. You'll understand why the brain is designed to work that way. And I want you to feel this journey in flesh and blood. Not as trivia. Not as a list of fun facts. But as a confrontation with the machinery that manufactures the story you call your life. We begin in a lab, not because your mind is a machine, but because sometimes you need a cold room and a humming magnet to appreciate how warm and human this mystery really is. You step behind glass. The MRI is there, a white cylinder like a minimalist tunnel into the skull. It's not cinematic. It's clinical. And yet when it starts up, the sound is a low thunder, metallic, rhythmic, almost animal. The person on the table is still, but inside their head, a storm of electricity is already translating the world into patterns. Here's the first thing to understand. Experience doesn't enter you as a single scene. It arrives as fragments. Light and sound and temperature and pressure and internal state, each routed to different neighborhoods of cortex like couriers delivering pieces of a message. Your visual cortex handles edges and motion. Auditory areas pull meaning from vibration. Touch becomes a map. Emotion adds color, literally, in the sense that it changes what gets prioritized. And this is where our moment is born, not as a story, but as scattered signals. If memory were a camera, the brain would be the worst camera ever invented, one that records the left half of the frame in one place, the soundtrack in another, and the sense of dread in a totally different circuit, then asks you to call it one file. So what makes it feel like one file? The hippocampus. Think of the hippocampus not as a storage vault, but as a master indexer, a librarian in a city-sized library, pinning together which pages belong to the same book. It binds the fragments into an episode, this sound with this face, this smell with this hallway, this sentence with this feeling. Now notice what I just implied. A memory isn't saved the way a video is saved. It's assembled. It's linked. And that means the first stage of memory, encoding, is already interpretive. It's already selective. Because attention is the gatekeeper. In the lab, you can feel this truth in your own body. When you're overwhelmed, when you're anxious, when you're multitasking, your attention narrows like a flashlight beam in fog. What you don't illuminate doesn't get bound. It doesn't get indexed. It doesn't become retrievable later with any reliability. This is uncomfortable, because it means memory begins as a draft, not a transcript. You don't walk through the world recording everything. You walk through the world sampling what seems relevant to survival, meaning, and social belonging. So think back to that pivotal moment in your year. The argument. The first meeting. The decision. Ask yourself something dangerous. What were you not paying attention to? The answer is not a moral failure. It's the human condition. And that's before we even get to the next stage, the one that happens when you think you're doing nothing at all. Consolidation. You leave the lab now and step into night. You go home. You sleep. And inside your skull, something almost poetic happens. The hippocampus talks to the cortex. During certain phases of sleep, the brain replays fragments of recent experience. Not like a full movie, more like highlights, compressed and rearranged. It strengthens some pathways and prunes others. It integrates new experiences with older knowledge. If you've ever wondered why a problem looks different in the morning, this is part of why. Sleep is not just rest. Sleep is reorganization. And in neuroscience, there's a word for the physical trace of a memory, engram. But don't imagine an engram as a single glowing file folder labeled Tuesday, 3:14 p.m., heartbreak. That's not how it works. An engram is more like a constellation. No single star contains the whole picture, but the pattern across them does. It's distributed, redundant, resilient, and also vulnerable to rearrangement. Because the brain isn't trying to preserve the past like a museum. The brain is trying to build a model that helps you navigate the future. Let's translate that into something you can feel. Imagine memory as a map, not a photograph. A photograph cares about what was there. A map cares about what will get you where you need to go. A map simplifies. It exaggerates what matters. It ignores the irrelevant tree. It highlights the bridge that keeps you alive. So when you ask, "Why can't I remember exactly what they said?" your brain's quiet reply is, "Because I stored what it meant." And meaning is not always compatible with accuracy. Now comes retrieval, the stage you think of as remembering. You're in the grocery store and a song plays. Suddenly you're 16 again, in a car, the world huge and terrifying and bright. Or you smell a particular detergent and you're in your grandmother's hallway. One cue, one tiny fragment, reconstructs an entire scene. Neuroscientists call this pattern completion. It's like rebuilding a cathedral from a handful of stones. The brain takes partial input and fills in the rest using its best guess of what must have been there. And here is the key translation, the one that flips everything. Memory is not where you store the past. Memory is how you predict what the past must have been to make the present make sense. Sit with that. If your memory is a prediction machine pointed backward, then the past isn't a fixed object you access. It's a model you generate. Which means every time you remember, you're not opening a vault. You're running a simulation. So far, that might sound elegant, even comforting, until we arrive at the uncomfortable twist, the edge of understanding, where the machinery reveals its sharpest consequence. Slow down with me now. Because this is where the story changes tone. When you recall a memory, it does not simply come out intact and then go back in untouched. Recall makes a memory fragile again. It destabilizes it. Like taking a sculpture out of its protective casing and exposing it to air and light and fingerprints. And then the brain does something both brilliant and terrifying. It reconsolidates the memory. It saves it again. Potentially altered. Potentially updated with whatever you felt, learned, or were told during the act of remembering. This means your past is not just stored. Your past is edited. Let's do a live demonstration, not in a lab, not with electrodes, but with the only instrument we actually need, your attention. Think of a childhood event. Something ordinary. A birthday party. A school hallway. A family trip. Don't choose the most emotional thing. Choose something with a few blank spaces. Now picture a car. In your scene, a car is involved. Maybe it's parked. Maybe it's moving. Here's the question: was the car going fast when it smashed into something? Feel what just happened. Even if your original memory had no smash, that single word can inject a new texture into the simulation. Smashed doesn't just describe speed, it suggests violence. It pulls your imagination toward shattered glass, toward impact, toward a storyline that makes sense of a smash. And if you're thinking, I would never fall for that, notice the deeper point. It's not about being gullible. It's about how reconstruction works. Your brain hates holes in a narrative. It fills them, because a coherent story is usually more useful than a precise one. This is where we meet one of the most influential researchers in the modern science of memory, Elizabeth Loftus. Imagine the era. The late 20th century. Courtrooms treating eyewitness testimony like gold. The cultural assumption that if you saw it with your own eyes, then the mind contains a faithful record. Loftus begins asking a question that sounds almost rude. What if wording can change what people remember? In controlled experiments, participants watch the same event, often a car accident, and then they're asked questions about what they saw. But the questions aren't neutral. One group hears, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? Another hears, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? Later, people don't just report different speeds. Some report different realities. Smashed makes them more likely to remember broken glass that never existed. This is the part where you might feel a chill, because it suggests a terrifying possibility. A memory can gain detail over time not because you're recalling it more accurately, but because it's being rewritten with each retelling. Now scale that up. Not a lab question. A conversation with a friend. A family member telling a story at dinner. A caption under a photo. A documentary voiceover. A therapist's hypothesis. A police interrogator's leading phrasing. Each one is a potential edit. Not because the world is malicious. Sometimes it is, often it isn't, but because your brain treats new information as material to integrate. And this leads us to another landmark approach, one that feels almost like science fiction when you first hear it. Researchers run what are often called lost in the mall style paradigms. The idea is brutally simple. Can you get someone to adopt a plausible but false event as part of their personal history? Not by hypnotizing them. Not by trickery worthy of a staged magician. But by suggestion, repetition, and the normal act of imagining. A participant is told, sometimes with the help of a relative's input for realism, that when they were younger they were lost in a mall, or another plausible childhood situation. Over interviews, they're asked to recall details. They're asked to imagine what it might have been like. And a subset of people begin to remember it. Not as maybe, as yes, with sensory detail, with emotion, with that internal signature we call certainty. This is where we have to be careful and honest. Not everyone forms such memories. Not all suggestions work. The mind isn't infinitely malleable. But the fact that it can happen at all, and that it can happen without the person intending to lie, should change how we treat memory in high-stakes contexts. And then there's a third phenomenon I want you to experience, because it exposes the brain's priorities with almost cruel clarity. It's called the DRM illusion, named after Dees, Roediger, and McDermott. But forget the names. Feel the mechanism. I'm going to give you a short list of words. Just listen: bed, rest, tired, dream, wake, pillow, night, blanket, snooze. Now a question: was the word sleep in that list? Many people will say yes. And they won't be guessing. They'll feel it. They'll picture it sitting among the other words like it belonged there. But it wasn't there. Your brain remembered the gist, the meaning cloud around the list, rather than the precise data points. The lure word, sleep, is so central to the theme that your mind generates it, and then, later, misattributes that generation as perception. That phrase, misattributes generation as perception, is a technical way of saying something deeply human. The mind confuses what it created with what it encountered. This is not a bug that only appears in experiments. This is the same mechanism that makes you swear someone had a certain look when you can't recall their actual expression. It's the same mechanism that makes you remember a conversation's emotional truth while losing the literal sentences. So here's the paradox. Memory's job is truth, yet the mechanism rewards coherence over accuracy. The brain prefers a story that fits. And that preference is not moral. It's computational. Coherence helps you predict. Coherence helps you decide whom to trust, where danger lives, which choices lead to pain. Now stress test your model of reality with me. Two people witness the same moment. They stand in the same room. They hear the same words. Later, they disagree. We're culturally trained to treat that as evidence that one is lying, or one is delusional, or one is in denial. Sometimes, yes, people deceive. But the deeper point is harder. Disagreement can be the natural outcome of two reconstructions built from different attention, different emotional states, different prior beliefs, and different post-event conversations. Your brain does not record what happened. It records what you extracted. And then it rebuilds what happened later from that extraction. So when you ask, how can they remember it that way? The most honest answer is, because their mind is doing what minds do. It's making a usable world. Now we return to January. The cultural script of January is the fresh start. New habits. New goals. A clean page. But there's a deeper truth under the self-improvement language, and it's stranger than motivation. You're always starting over, because your past is being updated by each present recall. Every time you pull up that pivotal moment, every time you rehearse it in the shower, in the car, in bed, your brain opens the file, renders it, and then saves it again with whatever is now attached, the new insight, the new resentment, the new explanation that makes you look more consistent, more justified, more safe. That doesn't mean you're dishonest. It means you're human. But it does mean we need to talk about consequences, because society often treats memory as if it were a hard drive when it's actually a living system. Let's start with the courtroom, the place where memory has been asked to do a job it was never designed for. Eyewitness testimony feels powerful precisely because it's told with the voice of lived experience. A person points and says, "That's him," or "That's what happened." Jurors feel the weight of it. Judges feel the gravity of it. And sometimes it is correct. But the science forces a painful humility. Confidence is not the same as accuracy. The same mechanisms we just explored, suggestion, gist-based reconstruction, reconsolidation, can reshape recollection without touching the person's sincerity. A leading question can plant a detail. A photo lineup can bias a face. Repeated interviews can strengthen a narrative, whether or not it's true. And then there's interrogation tactics, where pressure and repetition can turn uncertainty into a story that feels inevitable. Not because the person wants to confess falsely, but because the brain tries to resolve cognitive dissonance by building coherence. Then there's therapy, one of the most delicate arenas of all. Therapy can be life-saving. It can also, if handled carelessly, become a place where narratives are overconfidently imposed. When someone is encouraged to recover specific memories under heavy suggestion, the same reconstruction machinery can create experiences that feel like discovery but are actually synthesis. This doesn't mean people don't have real trauma. They do. It means we must distinguish between the reality of suffering and the precision of recollection. And now, because we live in this era, we have to talk about the gentlest but most constant editor of all, social media. Your phone offers you a year in review. It selects images. It chooses a soundtrack. It captions your life with an algorithm's sense of what matters. Friends comment, "Best night ever," on a photo where you remember wanting to go home. A memory pops up labeled, "On this day," and you feel the temptation to accept the label as the truth of the day. External narratives become internal history. Not because you're weak. Because your brain is cooperative. It integrates. It updates. So what do we do with this? Do we despair? Do we become paranoid about every recollection? Do we stop trusting ourselves? No. That would miss the point, and it would be a tragedy, because memory is also one of the most beautiful adaptations we have. The practical move is not to distrust your mind. The practical move is to understand what it's for, and then treat it accordingly. So here's a personal tool, a memory audit you can run, especially in January, when the mind is naturally editing the past to justify the future. First, treat vividness as a feeling, not a guarantee. A vivid image can be a sign of emotional rehearsal, not of accuracy. Your brain can render a false scene in high resolution if it's been practiced. Second, separate what I know from what I picture. This is deceptively powerful. Write it down if you can. What do you know from evidence, messages, timestamps, witnesses, documents? And what do you picture because your mind filled in the gaps? Third, rehearse evidence-based anchors for important events. If something truly matters, an agreement, a boundary, a medical detail, don't rely on the romance of recollection. Use notes. Use dates. Use external scaffolding. It's not cold. It's compassionate toward your future self. And fourth, beware post-event information. The conversation after the incident. The group chat recap. The caption under the photo. The friend who tells the story in a way that makes everyone laugh. Those can become your memory. Not metaphorically. Mechanistically. Through reconsolidation, they can fuse into the engram. Now, slow down again, because we're approaching the philosophical landing, and I don't want it to sound like a slogan. Your identity isn't a static autobiography. It's a living model, updated like software, trying to keep you oriented in a complex world. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you adaptive. Here comes the revelation that changed the way I see my own mind. It isn't. You can't trust yourself. That's too blunt, too cynical, and honestly too lazy. The precise truth is this: you can trust what memory is for, meaning, prediction, survival, but you shouldn't confuse it with a perfect recording of what happened. When you remember, you're not visiting the past. You're negotiating with it. You're asking, what story will keep me coherent now? And the brain answers with a simulation that feels like truth because feeling like truth is part of its function. So when you feel your past shifting under your feet, you're not witnessing failure. You're witnessing the mind doing maintenance on the narrative that keeps you alive. But that maintenance comes with responsibility, especially when other people's lives are involved, when justice is involved, when relationships depend on shared reality. The science doesn't ask you to become distrustful. It asks you to become precise. Now I want to leave you with a thought experiment, something to carry into the next time you replay a pivotal scene. Imagine your memory of that moment is a painting. Each time you look at it, you have to repaint a few strokes to make it visible again. Most of the time you repaint it in the same style. But sometimes you're tired. Sometimes someone whispers a suggestion. Sometimes you've learned something new. And the repainting changes the work. After 100 viewings, is it still the same painting? Or is it a collaboration between the event and the person you became afterward? And then, the next great question, because this door opens into an even stranger hallway. If time feels like a line because memory organizes it, what happens to the self when memory is unreliable? If the past is a model, not a museum, what is the you that claims ownership over it? If you want to keep going, there's a video waiting for you on the end screen. Watch that next, because it's designed to extend this exact line of questioning and keep your mind in motion. And if you want a reason to subscribe that's actually useful, subscribe so you build a library of tools for thinking, episodes you can return to when your intuition is confident but reality is complicated. One question for you, simple, but revealing: what's a memory you used to be certain about, and then later realized you might have filled in parts of it? Tell me the moment, and what changed your mind.